Here from the Nature Conservation Council, 36 hours to go for our Save Our Biodiversity Telethon. Thank you so much to everybody who's already made a contribution to keep this very important work going, protecting our native animals, protecting our native species and forests, looking after the water in the Murray-Darling Basin, fighting climate change. All that work is only possible because of the support that people like you have given us, and we've been really just so gratified by the number of people who've chipped in, particularly people who've chipped in for the first time. We've had people who've been supporting us for years, and that's wonderful, and we really appreciate you sticking with us, but also the people who've been inspired by some of our work over the last little period and have decided to put their money where their mouth is in recent times. It's been wonderful. It makes all of this work possible, and we really appreciate it. It does make a tangible difference. We try to run this place on the smell of an oily rag, so you can be very sure that every dollar you give us is really making a difference and going to good causes. In this video, we want to talk a little bit about some of our work that maybe doesn't get as much profile as some of our bigger campaigns, but for decades now, the Nature Conservation Council of New South Wales has been very involved in bushfire management here in New South Wales. In fact, we're written into the legislation as a key environmental stakeholder in bushfire management across New South Wales. That involves us being able to send representatives to the Bushfire Coordinating Committee at a state level, but also in various regions around the state. There'll be somebody representing the Nature Conservation Council on behalf of environmental concerns in each of those bushfire management regions. We really value the partnership that we've had with the Rural Fire Service, the National Parks and Wildlife Service, a number of other organisations that are involved in making sure that we can protect as much of New South Wales from those terrible fires as we possibly can. Now, my next guest needs very, very little introduction. He is probably well known to most people as not just an outstanding citizen and public servant who has been very involved in fire management in New South Wales for decades now, previously as the Commissioner of Fire and Rescue New South Wales, but more recently as an outspoken activist and an outspoken critic in some cases of some of the climate change policies of the previous federal government, as a leader of the Emergency Leaders for Climate group. I'm of course talking about Greg Mullins, who joins us now. G'day, Greg.
Hi, Chris. How are you?
Thanks so much for being with us. Now, people may not know that you're quite involved still, despite having retired from your substantive role as a member of our Bushfire Advisory Committee. Can you just explain for us, just briefly, what does that committee do? What's the point of it? How does it all work?
Yeah, look, so I'll just give you a bit of background. Right back to when I was a station officer in fire and rescue in the late 80s, early 90s, I became aware of NCC and its role in the Bushfire Coordinating Committee, which was the peak body for bushfire planning in New South Wales. I was Hazard Reduction Officer for the Blue Mountains and later for Sydney. And the advice we received from the NCC reps was just crucial. And I was fascinated by the ecological knowledge, the knowledge on fire regimes. So fast forward to now, when I retired as Commissioner, first thing I did was rejoin my local RFS brigade, where I'd started, it's over 50 years ago now, with my dad. But I had a phone call asking me to come onto the Bushfire Advisory Committee of NCC. So I jumped at that because I wanted to give back after NCC had given so much to me in my roles over the years, and interacting with fire scientists, practitioners, ecologists. I keep learning. Whenever I go to these meetings, I learn a lot. So that role is crucial to safeguarding our environment throughout New South Wales.
Most people would be well aware of the terrible fires of a couple of years ago, and most people would remember some of those fires over the last few decades, where we've seen huge amounts of forest burned, of bush burned, with all of the consequences that come with that. Can you talk a little bit about, particularly not just the 2019-20 mega fires, but like just thinking into the future now, what is the risk? I think we're well aware of the risk to communities. What is the risk to nature from some of those fires, and what do you think some of the priorities we need to have over, say, the next decade or 2 decades?
Yeah, look, we saw there was a climate change time bomb ticking away from the 1990s, and I saw it from the 1994 fires onwards, and then we had Canberra in 2003, one of the first, or probably the first fire tornado recorded in history in the world. I think it was 9 Black Saturday in Victoria, and then it just got worse from there. We saw it coming. Now, what's in the future? Unfortunately, we're getting longer fire seasons. The severe weather that leads to the very bad fire seasons is more frequent now. So, for example, the Blue Mountains used to burn about once every 10 to 11 years. Now it's every 5 or 6. And you think about just one species, the mountain ash trees, and we've seen this around Kosciuszko, they need decades to regrow and produce seed. And if you get fires too frequently, the seed banks go and it's bye-bye. You don't have that species anymore. And by the way, they sequester a lot of CO2. They drag a lot of CO2. So we're losing the animals that rely on them. Everything's out of whack. So the projections at the moment, head of the UN recently said that the commitments by governments around the world means that by 2030, emissions will go up by 14%. They won't go down. It's getting warmer and warmer. And one study in particular that chills me to the bone, I have to say, says that by 2040, black summer, the weather conditions of black summer will be average in Australia. That'll be an average summer. So and you'll have extremes over 50 degrees in places like Sydney, in the low 50s. By 2060, that summer will be exceedingly cool. That's on current warming projections. So, and I think back to those fires which I fought throughout New South Wales, the silence in the forests afterwards, the far south coast, no birds, no nothing, no scampering animals, 3 billion animals killed or displaced by those fires. And it's frightening. So we have to take action.
That 2060 statistic really kind of worries me the most. I've got an 8-year-old daughter, and in 2060 she'll be the same age that I am now. We're not talking about generations that are yet to be born. We're not talking about people that don't currently live on the planet being people who are going to be affected by this stuff. People who are well and truly alive today will be staring down some of these projections into the future, which I personally think is terrifying. Greg, one of the kind of common refrains from people during the 2019-2020 fires was that the reason the fires are so bad is because the greenies won't let hazard reduction happen. The national parks are locked up. You can't do a burn. There's not enough burning that's going on. What do you say to that?
I was going to say a word starting with B and ending with T, but there might be children listening. So I think mums and dads and adults, you know what word. That's just lies. Lies from people who know that it's not true, and misinformation passed on by people who are ill-informed. So what's really happening with hazard reduction? During the Black Summer fires on days of extreme and catastrophic fire danger, I saw fires burning across bare paddocks. Every bit of biological matter in the soil burnt, and nothing could stop these fires. I remember one day pulling crews out on the road to Chinolan Caves because the wind got up. It had been hazard reduced 18 months before, and I thought it's fairly low fuels, we might pull the fire up here, but no. So they were weather-driven fires, not fuel-driven. The number of days of very high fire danger and above was, as the New South Wales Bushfire Inquiry said, was magnitudes greater than ever before experienced. So it's about the weather, it's about the climate. We can't burn at the moment. One of my responsibilities in my rural fire district as a group officer is hazard reduction. We can't burn because it's too wet. And we know that when it dries out, it'll be too hot and windy. So you get these narrow windows to burn, but we are doing a lot of burning. But the trouble is when you get fires that jump 8 to 12 kilometres at a time, good luck pulling it up with a measly little hazard reduction burns. So we'd have to burn everything to have any effect. So this is why it's so crucial to take action on climate, but also we put things in the way of fires that burn. So, and I mean homes and infrastructure, we've got a responsibility to harden them so that they will survive and they can be a haven for people. But the nature of fires now, on the worst days, on catastrophic fire danger days, we can't fight the fires. We can't put aircraft in the air because it's too windy. You'll get pyroconvective storms, so fire-driven storms that will flip fire trucks on their roof and kill people, which did happen. So it's a whole new ballgame, Chris, and these people are seriously ill-informed and some of them are just liars.
Greg, thank you so much for being for doing what you do, but also for being a huge supporter of NCC, both with your time and with your money. And thanks for joining us at the Telethon. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris. And listeners, open up your pockets. This is crucial. You really need to support this. I want my kids to see the animals that I saw when Mum and Dad took me camping when I was a kid, and my grandkids, but it's not looking real good. Thanks.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it.
And we're out. Thanks, Greg.